Good morning, everybody, and welcome. And thank you so much for joining us on this, well, a little overcast day in Sydney anyway. I'm here to welcome you to a session with Danny Haskey, who's going to show us how to start our journey on family history. Now, for each of us, I'm sure we've started somewhere and then we've hit roadblocks and then we've forgotten that there's a whole bunch of other stuff out there that we can do. Danny has had over 20 years of experience of doing family history. And so it's my absolute pleasure to hand over to her and sit back, relax, enjoy.
Good morning, everybody. My name's Danny Haskey, and as Barbara said, I have been researching more or less for 2 decades, I think, more or less. I've been involved with first AJGS, the Genealogical Society, and then AJHS, the Historical Society, for almost all of that time. I think Barbara found recently that I had joined in 2009, but I had been involved previous to that because Ricky Nash, one of the stalwarts of our society, was a second cousin of mine. So once she realised I was interested in the family history, she dragged me in. I do have a day job in the film, TV and events industry as a teleprompt operator, which is a very strange job, but it does give me a lot of sitting time where I can rummage around on the internet. And over the last couple of years, I've also had the privilege of doing some research for the SBS series, Who Do You Think You Are? I did some research for the Camilla Franks episode, the Matt Day episode, which is coming up in a couple of weeks, and I've just done a few days for an episode for next season as well. So that is pretty much my dream job, but they don't hire full-time. So hopefully I will continue to get some work from them. So let's begin at the beginning. What is genealogy? Why do we do it? And where do we start? So genealogy is the study of our personal family history. We do it to understand ourselves by uncovering the stories of our ancestors. We do it because we're curious about where our family comes from. Where can we do it? Well, nowadays we can do it anywhere we've got an internet connection, but it's also a really, really fabulous excuse to travel. You will actually get more from visiting archives in the end than you will get online. Both are fantastic things to do. And how do we do it? Well, we combine the skills of a historian, a detective, a data analyst, a psychologist, and a storyteller to uncover the intimate details of our ancestors' lives. But I do want to give a word of caution. Genealogy is highly addictive. It will suck your time. It will suck your money. It will quite possibly suck your family's patience as you keep telling stories. But learning about our ancestors is a fascinating and engrossing activity that can take you on a journey through time and space. And as I said, as you uncover your family stories, you may just learn something about yourself. So the first thing I want to do is bust 3 pervasive myths that often stop people from starting. One of the most common ones, and this largely has an American genesis, in that people say, oh, the guy at Ellis Island changed my family's name. And so the bigger picture of that is that family names were changed by border officials or migration officials. It didn't happen. Migrants carried official documents, even refugees. That being said, it was not uncommon for people to change their names as soon as they arrived in the country. So whereas their migration document or even their naturalisation documents might have an old name, they might have started using a new name at some point. And only about 30% of people in Australia change their name officially by deed poll. So most people often just started using a name. But if they did change their name by deed poll, there will be an announcement actually in the newspaper, and then it is possible to actually get the deed poll record. So finding that transitional point between the name change can be quite difficult. If you're really, really, really lucky, you might get a document that has the old name crossed out and the new name written in. Okay, myth number 2 is that all the records were destroyed in the war, whether that's World War I or World War II. There's this fallacy that all the records burned up. While, of course, a lot of original records were destroyed, millions of records survived either by being moved into cellars protected by officials, or prior to the war, they had already been photographed by the Church of the Latter-day Saints, the Mormons. We have an enormous debt to the Mormon Church. They have the largest genealogical repository in the world, and they microfilmed over a period of many, many years. They microfilmed thousands and thousands and thousands, actually millions of records. Now, all of those microfilms have been digitized. They haven't all been indexed. The Mormons have the site Family Search, and Family Search have recently introduced a thing called full text search. Full text search scans an enormous number of records, millions of records, and it can read the handwriting. So for some non-indexed records, full text search can be a way of searching them. There are still an enormous number of records that are only accessible via Family Search research centres. Some of those are indexed, some of those are not. But in time, everything will get indexed, everything will be searchable. The third prevailing myth, and this is the one I find the most pernicious, is that my family is boring. No family is boring. You can be from a line of farmers out in, the middle of nowhere, but every family has an incredible collection of rakes and rogues and renegades, heroes and heroines, hellraisers, high achievers. Uncovering their stories is the fun part. And finding and preserving those stories is an act of love, and it perpetuates their memory through generations. Okay, so how do we do it? I used to call this slide the golden rules of genealogy, but I've decided that they're not rules, they're guidelines. Don't have to do them, but they're best practice. They help. If you follow this, you'll get more out of it. So the first thing to do or to think of is it's easier to work backwards from you and your parents and then your grandparents than starting way back when. So if you're just getting started and you're not sure where to start, then the first thing you do is you get a piece of paper and you draw a family tree. In the chat, there's a handout with a pedigree chart in it. If you haven't started, you can use that to start charting from you, your parents, your grandparents, your great-grandparents. As you start to see the information you don't have, that's your first research task. Try and find that data. Start thinking about what you do know about those people. And I'll get more onto how you find that data in a minute. So the second thing to keep in mind as you're doing all of this research is to consider spelling variants, particularly once we get offshore and we're in Europe. Things like accents, border changes, transliteration. If your family started in Russia, their names would have originally been written in Cyrillic. Or if your family, like mine, is from the Middle East, their surname may have originally been written in Hebrew or Arabic. So what is the transliterated spelling of that? So if they came from a foreign country and they went to England, for example, and they're in the census, or you expect them to be in the English census, how would they have said their name in an accent, and how would it have been heard by the census taker? Poland changed administrative hands countless times over 200-300 years. Sometimes it was German territory or Russian territory or Congress Poland territory. So town names changed all the time. So these are things you also have to keep in your mind. Now, the third point is a bit of best practice that if you start early will help you in the long run. This was a mistake I made. I didn't do this, and it hasn't so much caused problems as really inconvenienced me at times. So that's cite your sources, particularly if you're looking at stuff online. Copy the URL and paste it into your notes, or make a note. If you're writing it handwritten, just make a note of the website that you found that on. If you want to do it properly, there are citation formats. And if you're looking at stuff, for example, on Trove, they have a little icon on the side. It's a little bookmark. And if you click on that, it gives you 5 different versions of citations. And you can pick the one you want, copy that, paste it in. It usually includes the URL of the article as well. Online family tree programs often have a space for you to put a source in there. So if you start doing this early and get into a habit of it, it will really, really help as you move further down the track. Point 4, understand the context. Look for historical context for the actions of your ancestors. If you see that they've migrated from point A to point B, have a look at what was happening at point A at the time that they migrated. Was there any particular upheaval? Were there any particular events going on? We know that in the latter part of the 19th century were an enormous number of pogroms through the Russian Pale that facilitated a lot of people from leaving. There was a mass migration out of Russian territory in this period, and you can see it from when people moved. So by understanding the historical context, you might also find some unexpected new sources of data. And as our friend Abraham Lincoln wisely said, don't believe everything you read on the internet. And this will now also apply to AI, which I will speak about later. So be skeptical. There is a thing called the genealogical proof, which speaks to the levels of accuracy of different sources. First level, government records, but I can even tell you stories about government records actually being incorrect. It's always better to have more than one source of corroboration for a piece of data. But you may need to accept an apocryphal family story at face value. But if you find information that contradicts it, investigate further. Try to confirm which source is correct, because until a story is verified with evidence, it's just speculation. But that being said, even the most far-fetched story can have a kernel of truth in it. Now, this is one thing I will say is a rule, and if you don't do it, you will regret it. Never share primary identification documents such as birth, death, or marriage certificates, especially of living people, online, anywhere. Scan or copy family documents, store them on your hard drive or in a secure cloud account. File the original for long-term preservation, and if you absolutely have to upload something, redact information such as certificate numbers or specific dates or names, anything that could lead to the risk of identity theft. If the certificate is very old and you want some sort of detail verified, just take a screenshot of the detail that you want verified, or use Preview or something online just to cross out the details that are not necessary, because unfortunately it's a thing. People will always try to steal documents. So that's a word of warning, and it is the one rule that I will always tell people. My theory of genealogy is that it's a balance between two sources. It's a balance of data, which is dates, locations, professions, facts, verifiable facts, and stories, which are the contextual history, like politics, conflict, culture, the stories that your grandmother told you, the things that are more difficult to find in an encyclopedia. And you combine these elements to create portraits of individuals that you may have never met, but who you know are part of your story. So just like the legendary Push Me, Pull You, the more data you find, the more stories you discover, and vice versa. From a practical point of view, where do you start? So I call it harvesting the low-hanging fruit. You start with the easy stuff. Like I said earlier, you get out your pedigree chart, you write down everything that you do know, your birthday, your parents' birthdays, where they were born, if they're deceased, where they died, where they're buried, where they got married. You do the same for your grandparents and your great-grandparents. When you start to hit the I don't know this point, that's your first research task. You start looking for that data in the places where it may be. The other good thing to do very early on is to find your oldest living relatives and interview them. Have a chat, ask the family stories, record it if you can, go through old photographs with them, pulling out the old photos albums, look on the backs of photos, or if they've been labelled in an album, make note of that, scan all your photos, and then take the photos to that living archive that you've got there, and if things aren't labelled, start writing the labels on the back, or on pieces of paper, or in your online photo album, so that you know who people are, particularly going back and back. And you can ask these older members of your family about their grandparents, what they remember, or if they've come here from another place, what their migration story was. And that's going to give you the first bits of structure for your research. So once you've done that, where do you go for the data that you're missing? For Australian-based research, we have a fabulous array of resources. Births, deaths and marriages are state-based indexes. So you have to just Google New South Wales births, deaths and marriages, or Queensland births, deaths and marriages, or Victoria births, deaths and marriages. And it will bring up an index. There are privacy exclusions. So for births, you won't find anything in the index younger than 100 years. If you know your parent or grandparent was born in the state and about when they were born, as a next of kin, you have the right to apply for that certificate, but you have to fill out a form. You won't have an index number, so you just need to fill out the form and say who you are. They will send you that certificate. If it's in the index, then it's public record and you can order the full certificate. If you don't want to pay for the full certificate, you can order a transcript from a transcription service. It's slightly cheaper, but I find getting the full certificate is more valuable. So for births, it's over 100 years. For marriages, it's over 60 years. And for deaths, it's over 30 years. It's the privacy exclusions. AJHS also has a burials and a marriages database. The marriages are only from before 1944, but the burials go up quite recent. They're updated every 6 months, I believe. But if they're Jewish burials, Anywhere in the Asia Pacific region, we have burials from New Zealand. There are some burials from the South Pacific as well. And so there are some details. If you know more details, you're able to update that. There's a little form online that allows you to update that. Trove, that great big logo in the center of my graphic there. Trove is extraordinarily useful. It draws in data from all over the country, from various state libraries and state archives. It also has an enormous number of digitized newspapers with optical character recognition search. So that's like the free search from Family Search. It does a text search. This is not infallible. If the OCR is bad, so if the source material is difficult for the computer to read, and so it hasn't been OCR'd well, it may not find what you're looking for. So there are various different ways of searching Trove that you can utilize if you know something's there but you just can't find it. But generally it has a text search function. You can then filter that searching further down and often find extraordinary things about your ancestors. Be careful about names. There were, a million Sam Cohens. So if you find Sam Cohen in there, you've got to then verify that it's your Sam Cohen and not somebody else's Sam Cohen. So there are some search techniques that need to be deployed to ensure that you're getting the right person. We then have state level indexes, state archives like the State Archives of New South Wales, or museums, it's now called Museums of History New South Wales, PROV in Victoria, the State Records of Western Australia, also specialised areas like the Australian War Memorial. They hold things like probate records and business records and property records. The slightly weird thing between the Australian War Memorial and the National Archives, the National Archives holds personal military records, but the Australian War Memorial actually holds unit diaries and some individual records. So if you're looking for anything in the military sphere, it's good to go through both of those. And then we've got local historical societies in rural and regional areas. If your ancestor lived in Goulburn or out, Western New South Wales or anywhere really around the country in a rural area, contact the local historical society and see what they've got in their archives. A lot of them are not online. It's best to write them a letter. Include as much detail in the letter as you need, but be succinct. You don't have to tell them the entire story, and frame a question at the end. Don't just give them the story and saying, what do you know about this person? Ask them something specific if you can, even if it's, what records do you have about this person? Because it's easier to answer a specific question than it is to look and go, what do they want to know? Okay, so once we go offshore, for Jewish records specifically, the first place to start is JewishGen. For records regarding Poland and the Greater Polish areas, including Galicia, there is JRI Poland, but you will get JRI Poland results in JewishGen searches. So JewishGen is really the gold standard. It also has a few tools that are incredibly useful, like their Town Finder tool, which will give you the various name changes and the jurisdictional changes at specific times in history, post-World War II, pre-World War II, or between the wars, and pre-1900. This is very, very useful, especially when you're working in the former Soviet Union or Eastern Europe, because borders changed so often, particularly during the war. So these are the best place to start. For JewishGen, you must sign up It's actually the same with Family Search as well. You have to create an account. It is free. They will always ask you for a donation. You do get access to a little bit more when you donate. You can donate as little as $100, but that is totally up to you. The global search gives you 2 fields to search. Sometimes if you're searching a specific database, you may only get 1 field for searching. If you give them your $100, that will open up to 4 fields of searching. But the more narrowly you search, in fact, the less you're likely to find. But they're a very worthwhile organisation to donate to, and you can donate to specific projects that are relevant to your family if you choose to. We also have Family Search, as I mentioned, who have been microfilming for over 100 years, and this is a massive free resource. There are subscription sites such as MyHeritage, Ancestry, and Find My Past. They have a lot of records because they license a lot from overseas archives, and so there are some things that you can only access through those sites. MyHeritage does have a lot of free records in their collection, but a lot of them are behind the paywall. If you want to access Ancestry just for a couple of things, go down to your local library. Most local libraries have the library edition of Ancestry. Just ask the librarian how to access it. Usually just need your library card number, and you can get it on their computers in the library. And Find My Past and Ancestry are often available at state libraries. So I know the State Library of New South Wales has access to them, possibly other state libraries in the other states. As you drill down into your ancestor's story, you might actually find that you need to contact the local archive in the place where they are. So if it's in Poland or Russia, the best way to do that is to write a letter. You can use AI to help you with that. And then use either AI or Google Translate to translate it into the local language and paste both the English and the translation into an email. I always put a little disclaimer above the translation that says I've translated it in Google Translate and I apologise if it's gibberish, because I don't know what Google Translate is giving me. And I know going from a foreign language into English, I often get some very interesting results. So then if you find that some of your family members experienced the Holocaust, whether they were victims or in fact that they survived, then the Yad Vashem names database is the go-to for victim searches. They often have links to documents. If the person was recorded on a deportation list or in a ghetto, there will be links to that. And there are also things called pages of testimony. So pages of testimony are written by people who want to testify that their relative died, and they're in multiple languages. One of the best things about pages of testimony is it might alert you to a surviving relative. So if a grandchild survived and put in a page of testimony for their grandparents, then that gives you a hint to where to look for the grandchild, because if they're in Israel or they're in Russia, then that gives you a bit of a path to follow. If your ancestors survived, there may be something in the Arelson archives which have documents related to incarceration in forced labour camps. A lot of the displaced person records are there as well. And so these are very important resources and are freely available online. Once you're starting to collect data, you need to decide how you're going to organise it. So there's online family trees like Ancestry, MyHeritage, Family Search, Genie. Most of these, except Family Search, are subscription sites. They give you a small amount of free headroom, a couple of hundred people. They rarely let you access their full database. All of these services have some free records available, and they all do specials at different times, so military records during Anzac Day and stuff like that. But the real killer app for these guys is being able to organise your tree, so creating your family trees. You've also got the option of downloading free software that you can put on your desktop. Both Ancestry and MyHeritage have versions of that. They're free to download. There are a few other ones around. There's one called Gramps, I think. Apple has one called Mac Family Tree, which is a one-off charge. And then when they upgrade, they charge you a little bit for upgrading, but that's an excellent one if you're working on a Mac. It gives you space to put in all the data, to paste in stories as well, to put your source citations in. It also tells you if there's a record conflict or if there's something inconsistent, like someone died before they were born. So it helps you filter out those errors. And the ultimate goal of all of this is to preserve your findings securely so you can pass them down to your next generation. And hopefully you can cultivate a genealogical heir who is going to help you do your research and then eventually take it over from you. And so best practice is to digitize all your documents so that you can put them in a place that is secure. You can upload the ones that don't have any privacy issues or that you think will be interesting to share. You preserve the originals in proper archival storage. If you can, look for terms like acid-free or archive grade, archive standard, because otherwise, they'll disintegrate, papers disintegrate. And then you can share this information securely. So I want to briefly talk about DNA. DNA is very, very useful, but it's only useful when used in conjunction with a paper trail. So if you have absolutely no idea who somebody's father or grandfather is, a direct relative of yours, say, or your parents, and you're able to get DNA of the closest person to that person and put it up online, then the thing about the DNA sites is they do matches. And so you can triangulate shared matches to figure out who the common ancestor is. And in unknown parenting cases, this is what is often used to figure out who the parent is. But there is a little bit of a challenge with Jewish DNA, and that's a term called endogamy. Endogamy is that back in the day, a lot of cousins married each other in our communities. There was a lot of overlap. They might have only been second, third, or fourth cousins. There was first cousin marriage as well. But what that does is that it compounds the shared DNA. So we do not have 700,000 fourth cousins, but there will be a large number of distant relatives. So the rule of thumb is to ignore any matches under 100 centimorgans. Centimorgan is a length of measurement of DNA. And when you get your DNA test results, it will give you the size of the match with your matches. So pretty much ignore anything under 100 centimorgans because a lot of it is noise. If the rest of them give you nothing, you may want to go and investigate later, but anything beyond about 5 generations is going to be very, very difficult to figure out. Because if you think of DNA, you're 100%, you're more or less 50-50, it might be 45-55 of your parents, then they are 50-50 of their grandparents. So you're 25-25-25-25 of your grandparents, and so on. So as it dilutes through the generations, you may end up at 2% of a particular person's DNA. And as I said, those shift. So it can get down to a point where you actually have nothing from, say, a 3 times great-grandparent, but your sibling has 3% or 1% from that 3 times great-grandparent. There are 3 types of test that you can do. The most common is the autosomal test. It's also called Family Finder. This tests all the genes in your genome. Gene testing is a statistical analysis. So what it's doing is it's turning into a graphic what is a set of numbers, which is basically analysing the proteins. It looks at the genetic patterns. It looks at the patterns of the proteins, creates a statistical diagram of that, and then compares that diagram to other diagrams in the data set. So it's getting better and better and better and better, but it's still just statistical modelling. So the second test is mitochondrial tests. Mitochondrial DNA is passed from mother to child. It occurs in the tiny little energy sacs within our cells, the mitochondria. Mitochondrial DNA only comes from your mother, but it is passed to both genders. So if a male does a mitochondrial test, it will be showing his mother's and her mother's and her mother's and her mother's mitochondria. So if you want to do a study only looking at the maternal line, you do a mitochondrial test. If you want to do a study only looking at the paternal line, you do a Y-DNA test. Y-DNA is passed from father to son to son to son to son. It does occasionally have slight mutations in it, but generally speaking, if you want to test paternity, you get a male child and follow the Y-DNA for matches. You do a Y-DNA test and look for matches for Y-DNA to see if you can find common male ancestors. It can be very useful in some things, but it is a very narrow test. The other thing that the testing companies have are different levels of tests. So they test different numbers of genes, and the higher the level, the more expensive the test. So it's up to you as to how much you want to spend. You can then upload your results. So let's say you do your test through MyHeritage. MyHeritage is good insofar as, because it's an Israeli company, they have a high level of Jewish participation. However, Ancestry has 10 times as many samples. So Ancestry by far has the largest number of samples, and because it's statistical analysis, the more samples you have to compare against, the higher the level of finding something. But from any of these services, you can download the raw data. So it's basically a data file with a lot of numbers on it, and you can upload it to other services. So I think MyHeritage and Ancestry charge, or you may not even be able to upload to Ancestry, but you can upload your results to Family Tree DNA. And the other site you can upload to is a site called GEDmatch, which doesn't do tests, it just does matches. And that's the site that's been used in a couple of very high-profile law enforcement cases. So make sure you check your privacy settings on all of these. You opt in if you're happy for law enforcement to use your DNA in testing during cold cases, which they do, but it is an opt-in, not an opt-out. Privacy settings is something else that you need to set very high on every service that you use. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about AI. I did a talk about this, if you want some more detail, a couple of weeks ago, which is available on our website. But the bottom line is that AI is an assistant. It is not an authority. AI is very good for helping you. It's extremely enthusiastic. It wants to tell you what you want to hear. AI is really good at pattern recognition, at translation. It transcribes handwriting really well. If you've got a lot of data, if you've got a heap of documents and you kind of can't get your head around it, you can drop them all into Notebook LM, for example, and it will help you sort them out. It will give you a summary. You can ask it questions. You can work with it. Where it is less useful is looking at databases for you. Don't get it to look up things, because a lot of the major archives are actually bot blocked. They're protected from robots. These guys don't fact check. They'll just tell you what you think you want to hear. Their data is very American. Their Australian specific data, it's getting better, but it's mostly looking at Wikipedia and big open source sites like that. It doesn't exactly have emotional nuance, but it is good for some things. So where it is really, really good is transcribing handwriting, particularly in foreign languages. So there is a site called Transcribus, which you have to pick the model for the language that you want transcribed. It will transcribe the handwriting with a reasonably good degree of accuracy, and then you copy that into another program, whether it's another AI or into Google Translate, and you translate that. Transliteration brainstorming. If you've got a name or a place that you're really not sure about, ask one of the AI engines, ask ChatGPT, where do you think this is? If you give it some context as well, if you give it some points that, oh, you know, so-and-so came from this place and I've got this town name, but I don't know where it is, it will help you. You still have to fact check everything, because it will tell you what it thinks you want to hear. But I always ask my AIs to reference. And then if I find that the reference leads me to a page that doesn't exist, then I have to kind of go back to square one and say, that doesn't exist, try again. It's also really good for drafting letters. If you've got to write to an archive, put the details that you want to know in there and say, please draft a letter to this archive for this reason. Then you download it, you copy it into a document, you edit it so that it says exactly what you want to say. It's great for first drafting. You'll always want to change things, but AI can be very, very useful. As far as synthesizing data, Google's Notebook LM allows you to upload sources and then work with those sources. So it will go to the internet for things if you want. You can actually paste bits and pieces in, I think, from the internet. But with sources, you can upload a whole lot of stuff you're trying to make sense of, and you can build timelines, you can look for inconsistencies, you can find where the gaps are. And you create a project and you work with the AI in that project. Again, none of it is infallible. I built this presentation in Notebook LM off a couple of other presentations. I still had to remake a dozen slides, and I still had to remake slides in Photoshop to do things that I wanted to do. But it saves time. It can be useful if you use it effectively. The problem with AI is a thing that the industry terms hallucinations. Hallucinations are very, very confident sounding falsehoods. The example that I most often use was quite early on, so I don't know if it would do this again, and I would certainly ask it a different way, but quite early on when AI was coming up, I asked it about a person who I knew existed. I had a birth record for that person, but I couldn't find them anywhere else. So I put the information into ChatGPT and I said, where is this person? Who is this person? And it wrote me a fantastic biography. And as I went to fact check that biography, I realized this is fiction. It was a great story. So you have to be able to fact check whatever AI gives you. It's really good for things like contextual history, because it's going to known sources and it will give you, if you write your prompt properly, it will give you references. But never put anything in an AI that you don't want public. It is a public forum. And never add a detail to your tree solely based on a claim made by AI without finding a primary source. It's useful, but you have to be very cognizant that it can give you erroneous answers. So you're not alone. AJHS is always here to help you. We're here to help you, and we always love more volunteers to come and help us as well. So with that, I am going to stop sharing screens, and we are going to open it up for questions.
So now's your opportunity to join us with questions that if you haven't already put them into the chat. Okay, hands are going up.
All right, Sam, I saw yours first.
The question is, for example, with the records of post-war migration, particularly in the 50s and early 60s, what will be the starting point in terms of shipping records, for example?
The National Archives. So the National Archives has my immigration records. They have shipping lists and aircraft lists. So when you went overseas and when you came back, you fill in that piece of paper. I just did it recently. I was overseas and came back and it's still paper.
What about the Migration Museum in Melbourne? Does that hold any significant shipping or other records?
It may do. It may be Victoria-centric. So it's
State
worth...
archives, perhaps?
Yeah, it's worth looking at what PROV has. The National Archives have a lot of migration records digitized. So when you go into their website, you click on, I think it's person search, and then you go in the drop down to migration records.
And the final question, in relation to ASIA records, where does one go for those?
That is a very good question. I know that the National Archives has security records, so I would start there. But I would also look I would probably do a search, or there's a thing on all of the archives. They have an Ask an Archivist or Ask a Librarian. And that's a one-on-one. You put an inquiry in. Sometimes it takes several weeks to go through. But if you put enough information but keep only as much as you need to, they will look it up and they will tell you if there is a record in their archive.
Oh, and sorry, one supplementary question. And that's to do with organizational records. For example, if I wanted to investigate my organizational past, which involves at least 11 organizations, are the primary records kept in the National Library or state libraries?
What kinds of organizations?
Well, for example, ECAJ.
ECAJ will be at AJHS, probably, because that is the repository for communal archives.
So it'll be an AJHS.
It will most likely be AJHS. If you have a look in, we have a single search box. If you're not sure, there's also person records, but obviously with the privacy issues around living people, if you're looking just for general information about the organisation, there will be...
That'll be specific.
Yeah. So you can directly contact the archivist, Sabrina, through archivist at AJHS, and she will be able to tell you what's available. But communal archives, particularly our communal archives, are held by AJHS. That's their brief. That's their...
Sam, have you ever just put your name into Google search?
I don't think so. I'd be horrified.
Oh, yeah.
I'd be horrified if I did, I think.
Yeah. Always Google yourself or
We
Google
know
your
we probably know
relative.
more about you than you realise, don't we?
Oh, and Trove. If you were involved in any of these organisations up to 2008, all the Jewish newspapers are online. So I would put and also on the AJHS website, the photo collection. So if you put your name into the AJHS website, and if you put your full name in inverted commas, that's what it will search. It will bring up all the different areas that your name appears. So in the photos, that's the Jewish News Photo Archive, and they're working on facial recognition with that. And so they've had people indexing it with people that they know. So if I put my name in, I know a whole lot of stuff comes up. In Trove, if you put your name into Trove and then you select, say, New South Wales, and if you see there's a lot in the Australian Jewish News, and so you select that as well, it will isolate all the Australian Jewish News articles where it thinks your name is appearing. Okay. And so you'll be able to see all the articles that you were in.
Yeah.
I think up to 2008 is where I think the cutoff is. So, yeah, that's quite amusing to do as well. We've had some stuff in the thing. So, Leanne, you're saying my great-grandfather, Alfred Stern, arrived in Australia in 1912 as a newborn. Oh, okay. They travelled from Cape Town. 1912. Did they land in New South Wales or Victoria or Western Australia?
Not 100% sure. I've tried all of those avenues to try and find them. It appears, I have looked on the National Archives, and it appears that there's some records prior to 1912, but seems to be a gap there.
Yeah,
I've also tried the South African Cape Town records as well. Hard to find though.
The problem is there was a point where if you were in like Coach, the equivalent of Coach,
yep,
it might have just had an initial and a surname, or it might have just had 155 passengers. Like there's a point where the shipping lists were very, very dodgy.
Yep.
Which makes it very, very challenging. The other thing is to try Trove, because Trove sometimes had arrivals. Yep. It had the list of who was arriving, but again, it may only be an initial and a surname. It won't have had children. Mm-hmm. It might just have Mr. and Mrs.
Yep, and sometimes just plus infant.
Exactly.
Or not at all.
So there is a very messy period when there was a lot of people coming in and out where it became quite challenging.
Yeah, well, according to some of the paperwork I found about him, he lists himself as a British citizen.
Yeah.
But then again, for somebody else said there, Poland, England, South Africa.
Yeah.
They seem to be travel backwards and forwards between South Africa and England. They could have come from England for all I know.
If they were in South Africa before 1900 and something, there was a life event there, like a marriage or a birth or something, mm-hmm. Look at Family Search's South African records, because mm-hmm. I've found some really, really good stuff on there.
Yeah, I believe family members I can find. I'm sure there's a story because his wife wasn't Jewish. She was Dutch South African. And I'm sure there's a story around that, because one minute they're married and then the next minute they didn't get married till 1919 in Australia, but also said they were married in 1911 in Cape Town, but there doesn't appear to be any record of that. A large age difference as well between the two of them.
Right.
His birth date changes anywhere from about 1868 through to 1882, depending on which piece of paper you read.
Yeah.
Still chipping away at it, but yeah, thank you. I'll keep working on it.
It's a challenge.
Yeah, no, it's interesting.
Okay. Sue, my relatives came from Poland via England. They saw a name of a street in London, took that surname. Okay. How would I find the name? If the name was changed by deed poll in England, You could start with the National Archives in England, find out, or you could just, if you're on Facebook, there's a Facebook page for English Jewish genealogy. There's also a page called Tracing the Tribe, which is fabulous. Everyone's very helpful. You could just put a post up there saying, does anyone know how to access deed polls in the UK? That's if they change their name by a deed poll. When I went to look for my great-great-grandfather's name change here, and I had to go to the property board, the one that used to be behind St Mary's Cathedral, that beautiful old building. It was lovely going in there. And the guy who took me out into the stacks to the one book that had deed polls in it said, oh, you'll be really lucky to find anything. Only about 30% of people change their name legally. Now, I was lucky because his original name was unusual. I knew what it was. I found him. I found all the references. The guy was very surprised. And I said, okay, yeah, copies, please. So he gave me the photocopies of those documents. I paid $15.
There's also the Great Britain Jewish Genealogical Society, which might be able to help.
Yeah. So you could just also Google where are English deed poll records held. Again, that's where Google, and particularly now that Gemini's been incorporated, it could give you a summary, it could point you towards it. But again, with any AI, word of caution, check the references. The only way you're ever going to be sure of what that name was is there are two avenues. You find a document where both of those names are on it. So, for example, if they did do a deed poll. The other way, and I had success with this actually in the Camilla Franks research, was DNA. So if you do DNA and then you look at your matches, and if you find, you have to then actually build the family trees of your matches to see where the commonality could be. And this is how we actually found the original surname and place of birth for Camilla, where we were then able to show her that huge family tree, if you've seen the episode, where there were two matches in England, and we built back their trees, and I was able to find one of the names of one of these people on a death, on her great-great-grandfather's death record as a witness. And so that then cemented, one of these people knew what the original family surname had been. And so that then cemented the connections between them, which meant it was actually her great-great-grandmother that we went back from, but it gave us that clue that we needed, but it was arduous. The ancestry people had done the building out for me, and so none of it is foolproof, but it's a way of figuring out where they might have come from. But a lot of it is triangulation. We call it data triangulation. So if you don't find, it's a good story and it could be true. Whether you need to, so you check if they're in the census, where they're in the census. You can then look at the census beforehand. You can look up that same address. It depends how long they were in England for. And you sort of have to pick at each little clue and see which one pays off for you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, JR, I'm searching for what happened to my late father's aunt, Regina Shire. So her husband is buried in Rookwood. How old was your father's aunt, Regina, when her husband died?
I have no idea.
Do you have his death certificate?
No, I just got his gravestone.
Okay, get his death certificate.
Yeah.
Were they married in Australia?
It was either Australia or Poland, just before.
Okay, have a look and see if they were married here.
Okay.
If she was relatively young, I'm talking anything under 60, when he died, she might have remarried. So you can look the way I've worked out what the pattern is in New South Wales births, deaths and marriages. People were generally registered under their married name for their second marriage, but they were often buried with their first husband. So one thing to do is to look at what are the neighbouring graves to his grave.
Yeah.
She might be there. You never know, but she might be under a different name because she may have remarried.
I thought maybe she might have gone to Israel and died there or something.
That is also a possibility. If that is something that she might have done.
I wouldn't have known where to start.
No. Well, it depends on whether she kept the name. If she kept the name, go onto Jewish Gen and look for the JOWBA, JOWBA, Jewish online worldwide burial
records
database. It's basically a database of Jewish burials globally. Every burial in Israel is on there, and they keep it relatively up to date. AJHS contributes all the data for Australia and the South Pacific. I would probably start with actually just putting Regina Shire into births, deaths and marriages. If it's before, what is it now, 1956, I think?
Well, he died about 53, 54.
Okay, so if she died in the next couple of years after that, sorry, if she remarried, so what you do, if you don't have a surname for the husband, just put an asterisk in there and then put her name in the wife's name and then put kind of from, if he died in 54, I'd put 1953 up to the date, and it's usually written in the index up to the day before the last date they're saying is available. And if she remarried, it may be there. If she died overseas, then try JOWBA, and that may give you, there could be lots more Regina Shires, but that might give you a hint. But I would probably get his death certificate, which will certainly tell you if she was still alive when he died. It will give you the name of the children.
See, I don't know what children they had. If they had children, I've got no idea.
Oh, that'll all be on the death certificate.
On the death.
And if you can find the marriage certificate, then that will give you parents' names. That will give you a lot more other information. So if they're married in Australia, if they're married in Poland, depending on the dates, you could try JRI Poland. But it helps to know what her maiden name was. Do you know what her maiden name was? Or if Shire was a...
I could find that out. It was probably the same as my surname.
Right.
Yes.
And so, yeah, you just kind of, again, pick away at those little things. But, yeah, I would start with seeing who... I would maybe look up the AJHS database for Max Shire, the burial database, to see if there's any reference. That may also have the transcription. There may also be a photograph of the grave on there.
I've been to the grave, and it only says his name when he was born and when he died.
Oh, okay. So she's not buried next to him.
No, it's an empty spot.
Oh, it's an empty spot.
Yes.
That's interesting. Very interesting.
That's
Okay.
why I'm curious.
Yeah. Okay. She may have, depending on how old she was at the time, she may have remarried, or as you say, if it was an option, she may have gone overseas and ended up died in Israel. So
She's not in the Ryerson Index.
yes, the other source, which I forgot to mention, was the Ryerson Index. So the Ryerson Index is an index of all death notices.
She's not there.
Australian papers. Okay, so she's not in the Ryerson Index.
That is Bill Ryerson.
Okay. Ryerson. It's very, very useful to figure out where death notices are. Then you go to Trove. If it's in a later newspaper, particularly Sydney Morning Herald or The Age, you go to the State Library of New South Wales or Victoria. They have digitised newspapers in a couple of different data sets. One, it goes up to 2000. The next one goes from 2006 onwards. There is a black hole between 2000 and 2006 where you have to physically go to the library and pull out the microfilm from the drawer. It's incredibly annoying. But
well, thanks for that.
You look that up. So
Can my wife ask a quick question?
Yeah, sure.
Quick.
My name's Rosa.
Hello, Rosa.
I applied for my mother's birth certificate from Poland, from Warsaw, about 25 years ago. They have no record of her ever being born there. But I'm the oldest that survived from all the families. But I know for a fact that she was born in Warsaw because she was number 7 of 9. And my mother's cousin in Israel, who I'd spoken to years ago, she knew she was born in Warsaw because the cousin knew her from there.
Right.
I paid to have this done, but after about $200, 25 years ago, I gave up. How could the Mormons have, information if Warsaw couldn't find it?
What year? Do you know what year she was born?
Either 1922 or 1924, but that's what's on some of the papers that I've got of Mum's.
Yeah. Try. Yeah, I don't know if the Mormons have
from Poland. Warsaw flattened.
Yeah. Well, they were there way before that, so so it's worth looking. It's worth looking in Jewish Gen or JRI Poland.
Hasn't come up.
It's not there. Okay.
No.
So when you paid for it, did you pay an agent or did you pay archives or the government?
I paid directly.
To the government.
I went to the embassy. I went to the Polish consulate here because it had to be done in Polish.
Yeah.
And I had to pay them then, which I did. You know. And
if it was done 25 years ago, then it was inside the 100 years, but now it's outside the 100 years. I'm not 100% sure what the Polish privacy rules are, but if they're anything like, the EU has very high privacy levels.
Yeah.
If you have a look in family search or if you just Google, where are Polish birth records for 1920 to 1925 currently held? Hopefully it will give you an organisation.
Okay.
It will either say the State Archives of Poland or you have to go through this government agency. It may give you a link to a family search page. Family search has very good pages about where documents are found. It may say Ancestry, like Ancestry's got an unbelievable amount of stuff.
Yeah, but if you go to JRI Poland and you know the town,
Yes, I know.
it actually lists what records they have available.
Okay, is that the
dates that
JRI?
they have.
JRI. And my
JRI.
last question, it's not really important. I was born in Tanganyika. My parents married in Tanganyika. And I asked for a copy of my parents' marriage certificate. I received that, and then going through after both my parents passed away, I came across the marriage certificate, and the dates are different. That's not important, but if I wanted to look that up again, where would I look to see that? It's not important, but if I'm going to do this, I really would like to see what year they were married.
Just before the first
think
child was
you'd
born.
need to speak to somebody. Yeah, I think you'd probably need to contact the civil authorities in Tanganyika to find out where things are archived, or like it's like a big funnel. There's a whole lot of stuff that's freely available, generally from
Yes.
150, 200 years ago. The closer you get to the present day, and the harder it is to find stuff.
Yeah.
And also particular administrative areas are also more organised than others with what they've got online.
Yeah.
So you've got to look at the individual administration,
Yes,
and look at what they're doing to make this stuff available. But because if they're not, then you've got to basically do it the old-fashioned way.
For JR, there is a death for a Regina Shear, the 22nd of October 1959.
Yeah.
Probate was granted the 25th of November 1960.
Hang on, wow.
And you can get the probate packet from Kingswood Archives.
Yeah.
Could you repeat that again?
Very quickly.
I put it in the chat, so it's got all the detail with the
Wow.
and everything.
Jack's been
You
looking.
beat me to it, Deborah.
Thank you. He's been looking for years.
There you go. Hopefully it's the right person.
You can go out to the archives and look, but I am going soon if you want me to do a lookup for you.
I know those probate records so well. I recently had to digitize 120 of them.
Did it say where she was?
You need to get the death certificate.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it says she was died the 22nd of October 1959. So if you look up New South Wales births, deaths and marriages, you should be able to find her death index.
How did you find that?
Looked at the Kingswood Archives site.
The probate. That's MHNSW, which is Museums of History New South Wales. And then you click on search the archive.
Is that the right date?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yes, that's the other source of stuff is probate records are very interesting. And they often have quite fascinating information in them, because they have to include the death certificate. So if you just got the probate record, that would have the death certificate in it, generally, and also their last will and testament. So that can often have very fascinating information in. Okay, Ellen's got a question in the chat. My husband's great-grandfather, I assume you mean, was Jewish. Found records for him of his parents. Okay, his father's from Latvia, his mother's from England. Can't find how or when they arrived in Australia. Late 1840s or early 1850s. And had 4 children with her. Can't find a certificate for him. Okay. If he was buried as a Jew, then definitely try the AJHS burials database. Migration, 1840s, 1850s, try the Mariners and Ships website, because that's very early. Certainly if you can figure out which ship they came on,
I think they came separately. They didn't meet until after her first husband had died, and I'm fairly certain it was in Sydney because they
Right.
She and her first husband moved around a lot. They met in Melbourne. They had one child in Melbourne, and then the second child was born in Adelaide.
Yep.
The third child was born back in Melbourne. The fourth child died in Sydney, and then she sort of disappeared. And then the next thing I know, I found the birth certificate for the first child she had with her husband, but I didn't find a death certificate, so I didn't know whether she'd run off and left him.
Sorry, her first husband or her third husband?
Her first husband. I don't know whether she'd run off and left her first husband. And I did a little course. Actually, I was on Ancestry, and it said my husband's great-grandfather was born in New Zealand. And I'm thinking, oh, was he? And I did it. His mother and father and his older brother moved to New Zealand. They lived there for like 18 months, and then they went back to Brisbane. And in that time, he was born, his name was Mark. Mark was born in New Zealand. And after when he was 6 months old, his parents got married. And as happened in those days.
As you do, yeah, as you do.
And it did say on the marriage certificate that the mother, Caroline, was a widow. And so I don't know whether her husband had died, but I can't find any death certificate for him, particularly if he died in Sydney.
Try Ryerson, see
or whether she lied on the marriage certificate and said that she was a widow. And
that's true. She might have left him, or he might have left her.
Yeah.
There's all sorts of possibilities.
Look at Trove as well.
Trove, Ryerson, just to try and find a record of the first husband's death, just so that you can kind of put the timeline in place. So arrival might be trickier that early.
Yeah, because I know with Caroline, I'm not too sure what happened to her. I found through Ancestry, I have found birth records for her, and she had, I think, 4 or 5 siblings. Her father died when she was 2-ish.
Okay.
And then her mother died when she was about 4. I don't know what happened to her between the ages of 4 and when she was in Melbourne, married to her first husband.
Yeah.
So I don't know whether she went to the poorhouse, whether she wound up in some sort of Jewish orphanage. I don't know whether Jewish people had orphanages or whether she was fostered out by a Jewish family or anything like that.
It's quite possible. If she was in Melbourne, there were well, both in Melbourne and Sydney, there were Jewish orphanages. There was quite a strong social welfare system in the community. So it's possible as well that if there were other relatives around, so she was Jewish as well as
Yes, they were both Jewish.
They were both Jewish. Okay.
Yeah, it was their son Mark who was a bit of a rogue, and he married outside the religion. And
right.
And I think he left home. He left Brisbane with the English girl, and they got married in Sydney.
Right.
And they spent most of their married life, and their children were all born in Sydney.
Right.
And then they went back to Brisbane to be with his family. He got involved with dubious characters. Some of them were family relatives, and he was arrested, charged, and he spent 6 months hard labour in Brisbane jail for stealing tobacco.
Oh, great. Okay. So is that all from Trove or from Court?
Yes, that's
Trove.
Trove.
Brilliant.
I told you it wasn't going to be boring.
As you say, you don't know what you find when you start looking.
Absolutely.
Have a look on the AJHS website in the communal archives, like in the organisational archives, to see if there was a Jewish orphanage. So this person who was orphaned with their siblings, Was that in Melbourne or Queensland?
No, that was back in London.
Oh, it was in London.
Yes, she was from London.
Right. Okay.
So that's
So again,
so I don't know whether she came out to Australia as a child or whether she came out later.
Right. Well, again, there were strong social organisations at the time. So if they were sort of in the community and these children were orphaned, they would not have just been left. But it may be worth looking at the state archives, because presumably at some point they would have been made wards of the state. So the National Archives, finding out what is available about orphanages at that time. Again, this is about contextual history. So if you're in this situation, what are the options open to you? And that's the sort of question you can ask Claude or ChatGPT that might give you hints as to where to look.
Yeah.
The National Archives has a lot of the historical Jewish community archives in their collection, synagogues and social welfare organisations. So again, if you want a look up, you can do ask the archivist or ask the librarian and give them as much information as possible, and they can have a look to see if there's any record of that person. There's an index. So that's pretty much all you can do. A burial record for him. So who's the him that you're talking about, Mark? Is it Mark?
His mother's first husband, whose name completely escapes me at the moment.
Okay. Well, if he died in Australia and was buried under Jewish auspices, theoretically he should be in our burial database.
Okay.
So look up AJHS, you'll see the burials database link on the cover, and you can do a search in that, or you can browse, or you can.
Yeah, I'll have to go back to Ancestry and find his name.
Yeah.
But again, it did say, I don't know why I'm thinking he's Polish, but again, I have to sort of check to see whether he's Polish or not.
Another question in the chat from Sandy Bullion, who's got a lovely picture of a very nice looking mountain in there. Where would I find articles, photos of relatives in England around 1850s onwards? Your relatives. That's where you'd find those. Articles, we've got our journal, the Jewish Genealogical Society of Great Britain journal. They won't necessarily be about your relatives unless your relatives were particularly distinctive, but it will give you ideas about their life. Photographs didn't.
Sometimes National Archives files or military records contain photographs.
Yes. And because I think most photographs are a little bit later, 1870s, 1880s. There are portrait studios started popping up in the 1880s, still glass plate negatives where people had to stand very still for quite a long time, which is why they all look so stern. And but earlier than that, you'll be very lucky if they were very important. There might be a painted portrait, an oil painting, or a sketch, or if somebody was artistic in the family. They will generally, unless it was an important person, they won't be held in archives. They'll be held in family collections unless they were gifted to an archive. For example, like the portrait of my 2 times and 3 times great-grandfathers standing over the levitating gold nugget that they discovered in Victoria, which was given by my great-grandfather's younger sister to the Mitchell Library, which I discovered by accident, much to my delight. So if something was deemed to be particularly special and was given to an archive and was found to be valuable to that archive, then hopefully it is still there. It may not be out on the floor, it may be in the stacks like my painting, but it may be there. Leanne B in the chat, is there a genealogical historical reason my grandfather added E to Stern? It appears his brother was just Stern. Family sort of suggest he attended synagogue in the 30s. Are there records of the rest of the family seem to be CNE? Do you know which synagogue he might have attended?
No, they just talk about the Sydney synagogue.
The Sydney
Got to be the
synagogue.
Great.
Yeah.
1930s, most likely the Great.
Yep, and there's a family story is that he presented a prayer shawl to somebody, a younger teenage boy.
Probably at a bar mitzvah.
Yeah. But it was I wasn't aware that he was actually Jewish until only the last couple of years. So obviously he had long passed. My grandmother lived till she was 95, but there was never any mention of him being Jewish or there being a Jewish connection in the family. So it's just as these things. My father actually mentioned, and it was actually my mother's side of the family. So Dad just made a throwaway comment. I went, oh, that's very interesting, and then realised, of course, Stern is quite obviously a Jewish name, and then sort of went from there. But so not much information at all, but apart from through my mother's cousin. So it appeared that my great grandfather kept his Jewish faith when he was in Sydney,
right,
to a degree.
So again, he may be listed in the AJHS burial database.
Yeah, had a look at that. I'd say he wasn't very Jewish. I know he was. He's actually at Eastern Suburbs Crematorium.
Oh, okay.
On the wall.
Oh, okay.
I literally had to lie on it was a private cremation apparently, and I had to lie on the ground to take. He's on the very bottom of
on the bottom. Oh.
Very, very, very. I found him though, so that was interesting.
That was good. You found him.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I did find him, but so. I mean, I don't know. The different times and different places. There's lots of different stories, aren't there?
Yeah, absolutely.
And they're quite deliberate to hide the Jewishness.
Yeah, interesting though. He signed up for the Voluntary Defence Force in World War II at Newcastle, and he put on there that he was Jewish.
Yeah.
So it's I don't know that was necessarily hidden.
Yeah, he obviously lived and died as a Jew, but but not culturally rather than religiously, probably.
Yeah,
but it's if his wife, who was not Jewish, then handled all the burial stuff, then obviously, if that was just done through a celebrant or a secular.
She died in 1922, so and then my grandmother and her sisters became foster children because he was a travelling salesman. So they seemed to keep in touch. He seemed to keep in touch with them, but probably, from what I can gather, was fairly spasmodic because he lived in various places around the city in Sydney. More like boarding houses, and then the three daughters, were foster children with like friends of the family.
Right.
So that could, who knows, that could be where their, the Jewish heritage kind of became forgotten, I think.
Yes, absolutely. Well, because it is a learned thing. If you're not living in it, if it's not if you're not inculcated, it's like any religion. If you're not inculcated in those practices, you're not going to really.
No. Yeah. I mean, my great grandmother was only 19 when she had my grandmother, and then literally came to Australia. My grandmother was like 2-3 months old when they came here. So it just seemed to be like a complete split from probably both their families.
Yes, quite possibly.
Yeah.
So
I just thought it was interesting. Was there a reason he? In some cultural groups, the way they spell surnames changes depending with males, females. I just didn't know if there was anything in the Jewish thing if there was a reason that an E would have been added along the way.
No, there's nothing culturally.
Okay.
But people change their names for all sorts of different reasons.
Yeah, it's not a massive change, but it's quite obvious. It's anything in Australia has an E on it.
Right.
Before that?
And it may have been some sort of attempt at Anglicisation.
I wondered that.
I don't know. I mean, I know another Stern family who are STERN.
Mhm.
So yeah, I can't answer that categorically.
Mhm.
As far as attending synagogue, I don't think the Great has public membership records.
But you can write to them and they'll
Yeah, you could write to them and ask if
they hold anything.
your great grandfather was a member.
Mhm.
If he was a member, that they might, and if you give them the details, if you know the date of that bar mitzvah,
Mhm.
you may be able to look up in Trove because bar mitzvahs are generally announced.
I actually found the name. I know the name of the person, of the boy, and I was was able to find a notice that said when the bar mitzvah was, and which sort of lined up. But but no mention of my grandfather
So
or great grandfather.
if you put those details into the letter,
that makes sense. Yeah,
they will be able to then look up the bar mitzvah record.
Yeah.
To see if it was a nephew or if it was why was he the one given the honour?
Yeah,
because
exactly.
generally some of that is generally documented. Whether they've still held on to any of that is another question.
Yeah, I actually thought I might research the family of that person, do a bit more research on that.
Yeah.
Just, you can look people up and do a little, exactly the things you said, do a little bit of research around that way to see if I can get some more hints there. It actually appears that the boy's father was also a travelling salesman, commercial traveller.
Right.
That could have well been the connection.
They could have been very close friends, and so he was given the honour.
Yeah,
of
I
presenting
get the sense that's what it probably was.
Presenting the talus to the boy, because there may not have been any other male relatives of the guy's father or
lived in the same area, also lived in the same area, Kensington, Randwick, Kingsford, Coogee, that sort of area as well. So
check the Jewish news around that time, because quite often those events were publicised in the Jewish news.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I've
looked
so if I'll have another look.
Yeah, if you put the name in Trove and that'll come up.
Yeah.
Okay, Sandy
Thank you very much.
again wants to know how to access old Australian wills. Okay, state-based records. So New South Wales, it's MHNSW. You look up probate files. They go up to 1979. Then there is a big gap. Anything after 2016 is the probate index on the Supreme Court. After 2013, probate index on the Supreme Court website. In between 1979 and 2013, you have to put in an application to the Supreme Court and pay $70. That's for New South Wales. For each state, they will have their own process. If you Google access probate records from X state, the wills are included in the probates. So that is how you get to probates, that's how you get wills from other states. In Western Australia, some of the wills are online. Again, I think it does come out of probate documents. I managed to get my 3 times great-grandfathers from 1895 in Western Australia, beautifully handwritten, exquisite. So just look up the state archives, put the word probate into the search engine, and it will bring up, generally start with the information sheet. There will be an information sheet on how to access probates through that archive. Yes, Sue, you got to unmute.
Yeah, I was just wondering, you mentioned about Ancestry.com. Like I did a DNA test about 10 years ago, and I've never really followed it up properly because I didn't get round to subscribing to Ancestry.com. But you mentioned you can go to the local library. So can you just tell me a bit more about how that might work? Like
So
they give
generally,
you access or something.
yeah. So generally, there's a thing called the library version of Ancestry. I have no idea if it's got restrictions or what the limitations on it are. I've always found it extremely useful because I've got a 10-year subscription to my heritage, but so I can't afford to have both, basically. So I just pop down to the library.
You have to have a library card.
So you have to have a library card, but it doesn't have to be your local library, but it's it's easier. You just get your
library card.
So generally what you do is you log in to the library computer, and that's with your card number generally and a password. And then you look up their e-resources. And within the e-resources, there will be an Ancestry link. Now, the thing about your DNA test is that it will actually be linked to your own login. Now, you will have had, presumably, a personal login. You can have I do have a login to Ancestry. You can have a free account. Which lets you access bits and pieces. It also lets you, it's also helpful because if you find documents at the library, you can send them home by email. So there's a little link in the top corner. So if you're looking at a document, say a UK census, there's a button at the top that says Save Record. And you get the choice of saving it to the local computer. So if you've got a USB stick stuck in the computer at the library, you can save it to that. Or you can send it home by email. So you just say send by email. You put your email in there twice. Put it in, confirm email. And when you get home, there will be an email from Ancestry with links to everything that you sent home, which are accessible for you to download those documents.
So that's excellent. Thank you.
That's very, very helpful. But your DNA results are probably linked to your original login. And so you will be able to log in for free. They'll probably say sign up. You just ignore all of that. And you find your DNA. You may, in order to see the results, you may need to pay or sign up, but they have these like really cheap 6-month deals and stuff like that. And as long as you make sure to cancel before the end of that deal, so you're not charged the full rack, then that can be a helpful way to do it. That's what we did recently. There's a story in the latest Kosher Koala, which I pasted the link in at the top, that concerned some research we did, and we could see these hints of interesting articles on newspapers.com. And none of us had a subscription to that. It's not a cheap subscription to get. So they had a 7-day trial. So I just signed up for the 7-day trial, grabbed everything I could, downloaded it all, and then set myself a reminder, and on day 6 I cancelled it. So
okay, that's really helpful. Thank you.
Little ways of getting around it. I'm not sure whether the state archives, or the state library might have access to newspapers.com if you want to get to it. It does have Find My Past, which is very English heavy and is really good for both Ancestry and Find My Past have records from the National Archives in London. In Family Search, when you look up their information pages on where archives are, they will have links. And if it's got a $sign next to it, that means it's a subscription site. If it doesn't, like if they say Family Search, for example, and there's a link there, that means those records are available on Family Search. But they'll say if it's on Ancestry, if it's on Find My Past, because these sites have licensed these records, and that's what gives them the value of the subscription. So I don't know how much my subscription is going to cost me when it comes around in 20, it was COVID, so 2032 or something, 2030. But yeah, I've got to start saving up because I'll go 10 years again if they do me.
Well, thank you so much. That's really helpful, as has been the whole morning. Thank you.
Oh, you're very, very welcome. Well, thank you, everyone. I'll hand over to Barbara now to sign us out.
I don't think there's any more that I can add to that, except the fact that you're all still sitting here tells me that you've enjoyed it and that we've perhaps helped to answer some of your questions. And if not, genealogy@AJHS is how you'll find us again. And we're more than happy to help you with any further inquiries that you may have. You're also welcome to join us and be a member of our organisation or come and help us. We'd love some extra helping hands of people who enjoy helping others, which this group seems to be. It does seem that you all want to help each other, which is great. And it's wonderful to find people who would like to do that. So thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye for now.